My Lords, I've spoken about the lifetime of the EDP and the enforceability of measures, but now we get to the price to be charged, and I'd like to amplify some of the points in Amendment number 141. There are very large sums of money and long periods to be considered here, and I don't really care whether the DCLG or DEFRA has drafted all this stuff. None of them really understand how to discount a cash flow. That's clear. Because if you have someone who's bought a house from the developer on the basis that the neutrality obligation has been washed away, hidden in the price of your new home is the market rate for mitigating a new dwelling house, which in Norfolk is somewhere between £5,000 and £15,000. That's quite a sum. Now, a committee, noble lords, particularly the Earl of Caithness, multiplied the present prices paid by the number of mitigations in a scheme and got to multi-million-pound sums, and wondered what would happen to the profit. Well, if only. Because the profit really depends on the annualised cost of providing the measures, not in 1 year, but over 80 years, discounted back to the present value. And none of this understanding is in the bill. Now, I know that as part of the Norfolk Environmental Credits Organisation, which I founded on behalf of the local councils, notwithstanding that we've sold over £10 million worth of mitigations, the balance sheet value is zero, because of the way that international accounting rules require us to discount the revenues against the costs over the whole period for 80 years. My Lords, there's no corporation tax to be paid, there's no profit to be booked, only risks and liabilities to be hedged, keeping our fingers crossed that inflation and interest is kept on top of until the last few years, possibly as far away as 75 years' time, when we'll all be dead and the money nearly exhausted, unless, of course, the provider hasn't got his sums right, in which case he'd have gone bust years previously. Now, none of this is contemplated by the bill. Now, we discussed it at the committee, but there's no more detail here in its report. But I do think it would be sensible for the bill to contemplate some benchmark accounting standards to value the upfront cash contributions against the tail liabilities on a consistent basis. And the reason is, because if we do that and get a level playing field, we will get private operators innovating, competing on the same basis to drive costs down while still maintaining the obligations. But this bill is silent on all of this. And as a result, we'll never get the leading private markets in nature mitigation going, which would be a missed economic opportunity for our nation. So I asked the Minister, what consideration has been given by the Government to providing a consistency of accounting approach, coupled with the enforceability I spoke of in the previous group, Group 10? The bill is long on aspiration, but absolutely conspicuously silent on the legal, contractual and commercial ways of achieving these objectives. And without commercial contractability, we're never going to get the delivery. So it's bound to fail, unless these things are belatedly considered at third reading, but it's very late in the day.
The noble Lord Curry in his amendment.
My Lords, I rise to talk briefly in support of 182A in the name of the noble Lord Curry. This bill should be shaping how private operators will be addressing the market for mitigation. Instead, we've got Natural England becoming a monopoly supplier of mitigations in a drive to nationalise nature, and in so doing potentially driving out private initiative. Now, in an earlier group, I touched on the distinction very briefly on permitting and licensing, and in my view, licensing is the way to go because it prevents the derivative secondary markets that enrich the speculators at the expense of delivering the outcome. And, my Lords, we can't afford to create, by way of permitting, a new milk quota disaster for those with long memories, where the mitigation industry just became a collateralised asset class that had everything to do with speculation and nothing to do with nature recovery. Now, that's not an argument against private involvement, but it is an argument for channelling and regulating what is a fast-developing industry, an industry where we have global leadership, and the encouragement of which will enrich our economy. We just need to avoid the Wild West that I have seen emerging amongst some chancers who are taking the money, spending it on Ferraris, rather than laying it down to provide mitigations for the entire liability period. Now, I'm concerned about the lack of scientific rigour at Natural England and the lack of appreciation that others, apart from themselves, want to innovate and join the market in this space. And I'm concerned that the role for private ecologists with new ideas, innovating with new techniques or technologies and so forth, will be discouraged. I'm concerned we're going to be led with the dead hand of natural England telling people what to do. My Lords, it's a heroic assumption to assume that natural England will be able to deliver mitigation more efficiently than a competitive, healthy private sector, given the monopolistic nature of the state-owned mechanism for charging and the speed at which their large bureaucracy sort of creeps ahead. My Lords, with their obvious conflicts of interest, how are Natural England going to kite mark private proposals? Success doesn't look like one where only their schemes have some sort of kite mark accreditation, or they have uniquely an engineered first mover advantage. What protections would private operators have against predatory pricing, or the loading of legal contractor inspection costs onto innovative solutions by Natural England, with the only opportunity for the private business to appeal against the organisation that's eating their lunch? My Lords, we need innovation and private providers so we avoid the muddled thinking and groupthink from the eco zealots that bought us the Bat Bridge or the impropriety of the Ebbsfleet situation. We must have streamlined processes where developers can work with landowners to propose and have certified good schemes delivered in local markets at sensible prices quickly. We need to establish regulated private markets for nature to avoid the situation where schemes will just be packaged and collateralised into some other prime crisis. The private sector has a role and could work in tandem with Natural England, but warm words mean nothing unless they are committed to law. And the bill needs to explicitly state that the private sector has a role to play. Importantly, that Natural England has the statutory duty to assist competition in this space, even if it's against their own narrow self-interest. Now, Amendment 182 talks about provision of guidance, and even at this late stage, might I invite the Minister to explain the nature of the guidance that might be implemented for the encouragement of the private industry and with the regulatory guardrails, and the need to encourage Natural England to help rather than hinder private delivery in this space.
My Lords, I